Hey guys! So, today we are going to talk about expectations. Your expectations and the expectations of your customers. So let's get into it. So, yesterday I had a great subscriber question on one of my old videos where I kind of compared Java and Scala. And this person linked me a really nice video from a Tech Talk where basically there was this keynote speaker who was touching on something that I think it was the most honest damn talk on Scala I've ever seen. He was explaining that Scala is facing a little bit of a crisis, and the crisis it's facing is basically that the adoption rate is declining. It is not going anywhere. It's losing some of its main contributors, library authors and such things of this nature. And he was comparing the successes that languages such as Kotlin and Rust and Go and so forth have had in a fraction of the time that Scala has had. And he was reflecting a little bit on kind of why that is. Now, and the question from my subscriber was like kind of if I could get behind the statements, because I work professionally in Scala. I've been doing that for almost a year now. And what's interesting is that this person who is a keynote speaker and has worked with Scala for years and years and years has come to the exact same conclusion as I have. And that is that Scala is an academic language. It is simply too, what I like to call it's a more positive take. It's too powerful. It's too diverse. It doesn't have because of its maximum diversity, it really only provides an academic value in many scenarios. You don't get any type of real business value from using Scala. There are situations where you might use Scala, but the business value isn't clear enough. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I will simply state that when you create a situation where you go for maximum diversity or maximum, let's call it maximum diversity, because it is a matter of diversity. You make one fatal mistake, and that is the same mistake that we were making 10 years ago in application development. 10 years ago in application development, the norm was that you would create extremely diverse applications that allowed you to do the maximum amount of stuff. In other words, maximum amount of features, a maximum amount of administration, and all that great stuff, like customization, all that good stuff, right? And what you would do was basically that you trained personnel that would use these systems, or you trained your users to understand how to use your application. You had thick manuals, all that great stuff. There was a lot of work for a user to be able to use a product. So, and certifications, remember those days? When a certification was not just something you kind of had to enhance your CV, or rather, it was something you needed in order to actually be able to use the damn thing. In the past 5 years, or say 10 years, or in very recent time, let's call it that, we've moved over towards trying to create intuitive experiences for our users. In other words, we want to create applications and interfaces that doesn't require a manual to understand. Now, let's flip that over to our programming discussion about Scala. Scala is, as a language, it's the same sort of idea that we had quite a long time ago. It is simply a lot of complexity where the value of that complexity does not stand in proportion to the work that is necessary in order to get really good at it. If you take Go, for example, that has seen a massive adoption rate, what's the difference there? Well, the language is small and it has a clear business value, clear benefits. It has a very specific use case. So if you look at that, and then you can take, say, JavaScript, for example, which is also a very small language in comparison, I think that we see an emerging pattern that I find very interesting. And that is that the maximum amount of stuff, in other words, maximum diversity, is not the thing that makes something popular. And I will argue, and this is what the keynote speaker in this little tech talk was touching on as well, is that there's a sweet spot to things. The languages who do the best are not the languages that have the maximum amount of empowerment, like Haskell, F#, and Scala. These languages usually do very poorly in comparison to the more pragmatic languages that meet the correct expectations. Because if you really think about it, what is it that a programmer really needs in order to be able to effectively work in software development? There are absolutely programmers out there who get really excited about the academic discussions and the functionality that really only caters, as we were stating, academic curiosities. But for most programmers, there's an expectation these days that has shifted from what it used to be. It used to be that engineer types of people who got really down into mathematics and all that great stuff were the sort of people that you built your language for. But that's no longer the case. Just as with application development, you don't have the option anymore to give your user a thick manual on how to use your application. We're going towards designing products that are better than that. The same thing goes for languages. So what is it that makes a language popular? Well, a popular language, if we look at the most popular ones that are out there, goes for simplicity and empowerment. A balance between these two things. Because if you go too far on one direction, you're going to have a diminishing return on investment. Scala can do a lot of different things. As an example, it can do probably more things than most languages, but to what end? To what gain? It doesn't matter if you have a million features that simply bog down your development process if you're not using them. It's great fun for the people who find this sort of thing interesting to play around with and just kind of stretch their brain, but for regular day programmers who just want stuff to be done, it's just a hassle. And speaking as somebody who is a beginner in Scala, I can tell you right now, it's not a great experience. I'm sorry, it's not. If you compare the time it takes to learn Scala to the time it takes to learn JavaScript or Go or any of these languages, it's a fraction of the time. And at the end of the day, you're still producing the same results. And don't tell me that you're not. Because there is no, as far as I can see, the use case for a language such as Scala is not strong enough for it to justify the level of complexity that it brings to the table. So what I want us to kind of consider here is that you have expectations, just as I have expectations these days, and these expectations need to be catered to in order for us to want to work with a certain language. Every programmer and just as every user has certain expectations on the product that you are delivering today. And from my point of view, when it comes to users expect a simple, empowering, and intuitive experience that provides them with the value that they are looking for. That's something that our users are expecting. And if we think about it from our perspective as the developers, what are we looking for? Well, we are looking for a language that is simple to understand, makes us productive or is empowering, and allows us to do all the things that we would want to do without a lot of, overhead knowledge and a lot of unnecessary time investment or with a steep learning curve, basically. Because in our world, learning new things is a constant thing, and that means that we can't have a solution that requires a lifetime to get good at. That's just not a good solution. So I will argue, and this is me sticking out my neck, I will argue that having a pragmatic approach and creating a solution that is going to be easy to learn, feel intuitive, and at the same time allows you to do the things that you want to be able to do is going to be, on average, a much better bet for a programming language than going for maximum empowerment or maximum flexibility. Because unfortunately, it simply takes too long to learn all the things you could possibly do with such a solution. Have a great day.